Good morning, everyone. Today, myself Patel ma'am, as we know, you know very well, I am from sgm College, Karad. Today, I am going to start with the SP Secretarial Practice. In this, you have been started with the chapter number 2, that is the sources of corporate finance. In this chapter, already we have seen many things. We have seen equity shares, preference shares. Last topic, which we all have seen, that was the types of preference shares. Okay, this topic is very important into your syllabus because in this topic you will come to know the various types of sources of corporate finance. As finance plays a very important role, we know very well finance is a lifeblood of the business. Without finance, you cannot exist in the business only. As money plays a very important role, and before that you need the finance, and finance is a lifeblood of every business organization, whether it's a corporate or it's not corporate, but it is very important. So in this chapter already we have seen the various type of sources of owned capital. The corporate finance is totally divided into two parts. The first is the owned capital and the second is the borrowed capital. Up till now in the owned capital, many things we all have seen. Only one topic is left that I am going to teach you today, and then we will switch to the second half of the chapter, which is the sources of the borrowed capital. Okay, first we will just have a small recap about that. We have seen up till now the types, the sources of finance, or you may say on the types of the capital which is being based, that is the owned capital and borrowed capital. So the sources of finance on the various types of capital which you can divide is divided into two parts. First is the owned capital and the second is the borrowed capital. We are going to see into detail borrowed. Owned is already teach to you, only one point is left. Owned capital is further divided into two parts. The first is the shares and the second is the retained earnings. Today we will see the retained earnings. Okay, share is further divided into two parts. That is what? Equity shares and preference shares. So up till now we have seen share, equity share, preference share. Equity shares meaning features, then we have seen preference shares, types, meaning, features, all these things we have seen into detail. So here we have seen all the different types of shares which plays a very important role, and with the help of shares only you are going to do different types of dealing in this corporate finance. So the own capital which we have seen is divided into the shares and retained earnings. Okay, so from where you will get the own capital, you will get the own capital in the form of shares. Either you have to issue these various type of the shares into the company, either it's a equity share or it's a preference share, or you may do the retained earning. Okay, so up till now the last topic which we all have seen, that was the types of preference shares. Okay, types of preference shares we already have been seen, and today we are going to see in the sources of corporate finance, that is we are going to see in the owned capital, which is divided into two parts. First is shares, which is already teach to you, and second is retained earnings. So today we are going to see the retained earnings. Retained earning means what? And the determinants of the retained earning. So today we will see the retained earning. First we will see the meaning of the retained earning, and then we will switch to our next point in that is the determinants of the retained earning. So let's start with the retained earnings. The meaning of retained earning means what? Retained earning is also been said as plowing back of profit. The name itself says what? Plowing back of profit means what? When profit you have already ample amount of a profit. Okay, example I give you, short example before going into detail about the retained earning. If you have ample amount of a profit, okay, then what you do, you dig and you put inside, and when you are in a need or you are in a circumstances, you have some contingencies, at that time you dig it and you remove the money. Like your mother in the home does different types of savings. When she do saving, at that time if any problem is there, that saving is only been used. Just like that, the retained earning is used as a reserve profit which he is going to use afterwards. Okay, so business organization are always subject in the variation in earning. It would be a wise decision to keep aside a part of a profit during a period of high profit. So it's a prime responsibility of the business only, when they are earning an ample amount of a profit, at that time a part of a profit should be kept aside, and at the time of contingency some problem arises, it has to be used. A prudent company does not distribute the entire profit earned among the shareholders. Whatever the company is earning a profit, that doesn't mean that when the company is earning a profit, at that time each and every profit, how much amount it has been earned, has to be distributed between the shareholders only. It's not true. In the sense, it is not being going. So at that time, every time, whatever the profit is earned, full profit is not distributed among the shareholder. A part of a profit is retained by a company in the form of a reserve fund. In the form of a what? Reserve fund. A part of a profit is kept aside and afterwards it can be used. But it is used in the form of a reserve fund. These reserves are the retained earnings of the company. When you keep a part of a profit as a reserve fund, this reserve fund is only being used as a retained earnings for the company. So the sum total of retained earning get accumulated over years and years, and this accumulated profit are reinvested into the business rather than to distribute into the shareholder as a dividend. That means 1 year I earn this much amount of profit, at that time I am going to kept aside. Then again next year I have earned this amount of profit, as a company I have to keep this amount of reserve fund, and when my reserve fund is accumulated in the form of a retained earning, at that time I can accumulate this reserve fund and can use into the company as a reinvestment. See, when you want to make a large scale, like small scale organization is there, but you want to make it in a large one. For that you need some amount of capital, but you cannot borrow from the outsider always. So at that time it's my duty, it's my duty as a form of a corporate, as a form of a business, that I have to, when I am earning an amount of a profit, I have to keep aside a small amount of a portion of a profit which can be accumulated afterwards and can be reinvested into the business, which is said as a retained earnings only. The process of accumulating corporate profit and the utilization in business is called retained earning. What it is say? The process of accumulating corporate profit. Okay, when the process is there, this process is what? In the form you have to keep aside only as a part of a profit. When there is a loss, at that time you will keep? No, because you don't have only. When there is an ample amount of a profit, at that time only you have to keep aside one of a part of a profit, and afterwards can be utilization. That utilization can be done afterward, is said as a retained earnings of the company. In simple word, it can be said as a part of a net profit which is not distributed to shareholder as a dividend, is retained into the company, and that is said in the form of a reserve fund. That means some part it may happen like we have seen in part of types of preference shares: cumulative, non-cumulative. Cumulative means what? It is accumulated year by year and afterwards you can get it. But non-cumulative means what? It is not accumulated. If you miss the chance of a 1 year dividend, that is missed only. That is non-cumulative. So as a part of a cumulative, when you think about, you can say that when the part of a profit is kept, that is a part of a reserve fund only. Company converts its reserve into bonus share capital and capitalize its profit. That can be used as a form of a bonus shares. You know very well, bonus shares, yes or no, it has been studied in the equity share. Bonus shares are given to whom? Only equity shareholder. Yes or no? Bonus shares are given free gift, as a free gift to the equity shareholders. So over here, this capitalization of profit by issue of bonus share is known as a plowing back of profit, or also known as self-financing. This utilization of the profit which is kept aside as a form of a reserve fund, as a form of a retained earning, is also said as self-financing. That means the company only is doing self-financing, or it can be said as flowing back of profit. Flowing back means what? When you dig your own profit inside and afterwards you remove it, at that time that is what? Flowing back of profit, or also said as what? Self-financing or retained earning is one and the same. So bonus shares are issued free of course to the existing equity shares out of the retained earnings only. Now only I said you that bonus shares are only given to the existing equity shareholder out of the profit of the company, that is said as a retained earnings only. So the management can convert retained earnings into permanent capital by issuing bonus share. When this is in the hand of a management only, the management can convert it into the various forms. They can convert it, they can utilize as a form of a reinvestment, they can give as a form of a bonus shares or in different form. So it is important source of raising long-term capital, and it is a simple and cheapest method of raising finance. Most approximately the company use this method only. Why? See, when you have your own capital, you can use it into various ways. Either you can give in the form of a bonus, or you can give to your shareholder, or you can do the reinvestment into the business. It can be done in any way when it is in the form of the owned capital. But when it's in the form of the borrowed, you know very well, first borrowed has to be paid, then the own has to be given the one. So it is used by established company, and it is said as an internal source of financing. So retained earning is the simplest, cheapest, and in a very good form. More and more established company do the various forms of retained earning, and retained earning is one of the internal source of financing. Retained earning is also said as self-financing or flowing back of profit. Most approximately it is asked in the form of a short note only. So today we are seeing now retained earning, the meaning, one of the definition in short. No any author it has given, only the meaning and the definition which I said you. Now we will see the next point, which is determinants of retained earnings. Determinants of retained earnings we will see now. Various forms of determinants of retained earnings are there. In the determinants, only 4 points is given. In the determinants of the retained earning, only 4 points is given. Number 1 is total earnings of company. Number 1 is given as total earnings of company. Number 2 is taxation policy. Number 3 is said as a government policy, because it depends on government policy also. And number 4, it is said as a government control. Government, or you may say the dividend policy. Government control is there. Okay, let's start now by seeing the determinants of the retained earnings. In the determinant, the first point is total earnings of the company. Now, what determinants say? Determinants say what is exactly into the retained earning. In the determinants, we will come to know only these 4 points. Why? Because retained earning totally depend on the determinants, how it is there, how the control is there, how the different types of policies are removed by the government, etc. First, it is given total earning of company. So it is said if there is an ample amount of a profit, company can save and retain some part of a profit. It can be done when? Because see, how much the company is earning a profit year by year. Retained earning depends on that only, because from that only a part of a profit is kept aside. So when the company is earning an ample amount of a profit, from that the earnings are removed. So it can be saved and retained for the retained earning as some part of a profit. More the earning, the company can save more. That means when more earning is there, more profit is earned, at that time the company can save more. But if it is less, at that time company can do no. If the profit is not there, if loss is there, then it can be there, then it cannot be there. So for total earning should be more, your ample amount of profit should be more, then only you can save and retain, and that can be utilized afterwards in the various form by the retained earning. So attitude of top management also determine the amount of retained earning. That means what is the attitude of the top level management. Okay, it also depends upon the total earnings for it. Number 1 was total earning. Number 2, it is said as a taxation policy. Now, how the government have decided to the corporate finance the various forms of taxation policy. It also depends on that, because see, various forms of policies are there, and it has to be paid compulsorily by the corporate finance to the government. So taxation policy also plays a very important role. The taxation policy is one of the important determinant of corporate saving. Why? Because if the tax is levied at a very high rate, at that time the company cannot save at the more form of reserve. So when the taxes are more, they are levied at more high rate. At that time savings can be there? No, saving can be less. But if the taxation are at the flat rate, okay, at that time the company can save more and more reserve, which can be utilized in the form of a retained earning. So taxation also policy is more. The company, how much is the company is earning, it also depends. How the company is earning more profit, it depends. Then taxation policy, if it is at a high rate, the company cannot save more earning. The next is a dividend policy. Now you know very well dividend means what? Dividend is given to whom? Shareholders of the company. Yes or no? Dividends are given to the shareholders of the company. So dividend policy also it is there. See now, it is a policy which has been it is decided by the board of directors in regard of distribution of profit. So dividend policy depends upon to the board of directors. You know very well, the elected representative of the shareholders are the what? Directors, and collectively they are known as what? Board of directors. So it is this policy, that dividend policy, which is decided by the board of directors. They only recommended it, and it is regard in the form of distribution of profit. A conservative dividend policy is needed for having good accumulation of profit, but this policy affects shareholder as they get lower rate of dividend. If the company decide that this only will be the dividend rate which is to be given to the shareholder, no up and no down, a conservative it will be there. At that time it is a loss to the shareholder, but the profit to the whom? Company. Why? The company can, if more amount of profit is there, if more amount of profit is there. See, some company decide the dividend policy into the different method. If they say the company is having more profit, more dividend will be given. Okay, like participating preference share. Who is more participating in the profit of the company? Okay, so no, we have studied in the last topic the types of the preference share, in that participating, non-participating. This was also one of them. Okay, so the company, the board of director plays a very important role, because they have to decide a conservative dividend policy, but this is a loss to the shareholder, but a profit to the who? To the finance, the corporate finance, or you may say the business also. That was the third point. Number 4 is the government control. Now again the government control is there. In the government is a regulatory body of economic system of the country. Its policies, rules and regulation ensures that the company work as per the regulation. Company has to formulate a dividend policy in accordance with the rules and regulation which is framed by the government. Now only I say a conservative dividend policy should be there. Okay, if ample amount of profit is earned, that doesn't mean that more and more amount of profit should be distributed between the shareholders only. But you cannot say like this, because full dividend policy depends upon to the government rules and regulation only. The government have framed some rules and regulation to the corporate finance, and they have to follow it. So company has to follow its dividend policy in accordance with the rules and regulation which is framed by the government only. So dividend policy can be decided only with the help of the government frame rules and regulations. So government plays a very important role. A government control is there, and according to that only the company has to go. They cannot have a common conservative dividend policy. They have to go and check it out according to the government rules and regulations only. That was the determinants of the total earning, which is divided into 4 points. Number 1 is total earnings of company. Number 2 is taxation policy, and number 3 is dividend policy, and number 4 is government control. In this way, the first half of the chapter is completed. That was what? Sources of owned capital. Sources of owned capital and sources of borrowed capital. Okay, the sources of finance on the basis of types of capital was divided into 2 parts: sources of owned capital, sources of borrowed capital. Owned capital was divided further into 2 parts: Shares and retained earning, which I teach you now. Shares I teach you earlier. Shares was divided into two parts, equity shares and preference shares. So first half is already teach to you in the sources of owned capital, which was divided into two, shares and retained earning. Retained earning today I teach you the meaning, definition and the determinants, which was 4. Yes, afterwards we will see the next important part in this, which is the sources of borrowed capital. In the sources of borrowed capital. Okay, in this first we will see the meaning and then we will switch to the next point in the sources of borrowed capital. Owned capital and borrowed capital. Borrowed, the name itself say, when you borrow, short example I will give you. When you borrow some money from your friends, that means you are going to pay your friend. Yes or no? That means I took the money from my friend. That means I borrowed the money from my friend. Okay, and already I am having the money, suppose. Okay, already I am having the money, but I need more money, so I borrowed from my friend. So always borrowed capital is what? When you borrow it. From when, how you borrow? Like in this corporate finance, you can borrow in different time. When you are in a need of a capital, at that time you borrow what? Capital in the different type, like in the form of a debenture, in the form of a deposit, in the form of a bond, or you may borrow it from the various types of financial institutions, etc. Okay, owned means your own capital. Owned means your own capital, you have invested, and from that what your property you are getting, that will be your dividend. Okay, borrowed means you are borrowing from someone and to them you have to pay first and you have to pay along with the interest. Yes or no? When you are having your own capital, at that time you get more profit you are earning by investing it, you are getting more profit, that will be the dividend. And but when you are having a borrowed capital, and at that time you have to pay, but you have to pay along with the interest. Always remember this. This is the prime important thing which has to be known in the borrowed capital. Name itself say borrowed. That means when you borrow the money from the common public by issuing debenture, bond, or you may say deposit, taking loan from the financial institutions, etc. So only own capital is not sufficient to carry on all the business activities of a joint stock company. Always a company needs a borrowed capital which is supplementary, which you are need. Not a single company is there, either it's a form of either any form of a company it is there, but you need the borrowed capital. Why? As a supplementary. Own capital is not sufficient. With that you need a borrowed capital. Every trading company is entitled to borrow money. However, in normal practice you have an express provision in the memorandum of association enabling a company to borrow money. Memorandum authorizes company to exercise borrowing power, whereas articles provide as to how and whom these powers shall be exercised. That too, these are very important. Internal, what is that? Internal, external, that is our memorandum, and articles of association, which is internal, external rules and regulation that is to be followed by the company. So the exercising powers are given, how, where, whom, who will decide. All these things are related to the memorandum and articles of association. The power to borrow money is normally exercised by the board of directors of the company. You know very well the board of directors are the prime authority, and they have a power from where, how, when, everything, how to borrow the money, etc. A private company may exercise its borrowing power immediately after incorporation, but however public company cannot exercise up till it does not get the trading certificate. You know very well, like stages are there. For the private company, if incorporation certificate they get, the second stage, immediately they have the power, they can raise the finance in the form of a borrowed capital. But here, when you are in a public company, at that time compulsorily the fourth stage has to be passed, and then you will get a certificate of commencement of business, which is also said as a trading certificate. When you get that, at that time what? At that time immediately after that can be raised. For the private company, second stage is important, incorporation stage. Afterwards you can what? You can raise the finance. But for the public company, the fourth stage is important, which is said as a trading certificate. So the capital can be borrowed. The capital can be borrowed in the different form. So here we have seen today the sources of borrowed capital meaning, and further we will see in our next lecture. Thank you.